Good morning and welcome to the Talking City podcast. My name's Simon Bajkowski and I'm joined by Tyrone Marshall. How are we, Ty?
I'm good, thank you, Simon. I'm good. Marginally refreshed after a relatively long day. Travelling to London yesterday, back to the door about 11:45 p.m. A few games with Avanti West Coast, but a better experience than driving to London. So we got there in the end, and a good opening day and opening weekend for City as well.
Yes, well, we are recording on the Monday morning after the Sunday afternoon where Manchester City once again kind of made Stamford Bridge look like a bit of a home arena for them. Very comfortable, a 2-0 win, which sees them off to a very nice Premier League start, despite all the issues they've had and all the decisions they've made in the summer that have meant they are slightly undercooked for the beginning of the season. But let's start off with, the biggest talking point from yesterday, which is how many passes did Erling Haaland complete?
I I don't know. I'm guessing this might have been shown on TV, was it, or something
The
like that? I
the the,
didn't
the
see
answer
at the
is
time.
three.
Three.
Three
Wow,
completed
wow.
passes. What a waster. Why is he in the team?
I mean, it's it's incredible, isn't it? How they just it's basically a team of 10, 9 outfield players until they get to the box. It's almost like they deliberately try not to pass to him unless he's in shooting position. I think that he isn't part of the build up, isn't he? He doesn't have the game for the build up. He doesn't have the game for Pep's 1,000 passes. So just wait until he gets to the box and then give him the ball and he'll put it in the back of the net like he did. I mean, he should have scored again in the second half, really. So yeah, I did 3 passes. That is incredible.
Three passes, and maybe even more incredible than three passes, 17 touches. But as you say, he scored a very good goal where he almost had too many touches in the first half to put City 1-0 up, and then had another very good chance in the second half, which was a shot on goal that Sanchez saved. So you would say a very effective performance from Erling Haaland, would you?
I think in the context of what he does for City, you'd probably say so. I mean, the second half chance, he didn't do enough with it. I think he made it too easy for Sanchez, but that's probably only in the context of him being Haaland. And like I say, the goal, watching it live, it did feel like, oh, he's taking too many touches here. The chance is gone. And then he just dinked it over Sanchez. And obviously he spoke afterwards about how Sanchez had made a great save against him last year and how he stays on his line for a long time. And I mean, in a way, it shows why he's such a good striker, doesn't it? That he's remembered that. He's remembered Sanchez's game. And he knows that if he takes the shot, sets himself and takes the shot straight away, as he did in the second half, he's maybe giving the keeper more of a chance. So he's perhaps deliberately taken some touches. We would also imagine a scenario where he's deliberately taking touches because Cucurella's the closest player. And he's taken these touches while slyly giving Cucurella some grief before finishing. I would say 90, it feels like 95, 99% of forwards would have taken the touch on the left foot, which was really good, his first touch, and then had the shot. Whereas Haaland's had the awareness to go, no, if I take it forward a little bit more, I can increase the odds in my chances. Increase the odds. And I guess that's what makes him such a phenomenal footballer, really.
Well, it's the whole package, isn't it? It's, as you say, to have that thought in your head about how Sanchez has performed against you previously and what he's done. And in those few seconds, it's brilliant centre forward play to hold off Cucurella as he sort of moves across the box. And then you think he might have taken it too far, but it's a brilliant dink to get it past Sanchez. And it's clearly incredibly calculated because everything is going through his head in order to make him think, I'm going to hit this there to give me the best chance of scoring. It's like that is what makes Erling Haaland so incredible. And I think this was his 100th, well, it was his 100th game for City. I think it's 91 goals and 15 assists.
Yeah.
Which is just phenomenal and kind of makes you think we are looking at one of these players who, redefines the game. And while everyone's been obsessed with how many touches he's been having, how many passes he's been completing, he has been sort of ruining all manner of Premier League statistics and winning lots of football matches and trophies.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Pep Guardiola called it Messi and Ronaldo numbers afterwards, which it really is. You know, it really is up there. And you're right. I think there's probably a perception of Haaland, maybe away from City, that he is just this like physical specimen with a power in the right positions and benefits from this wonderful team. When in reality, the way he took that goal showed what hasn't just scored goals for City, but has scored them for RB Salzburg, has scored them for Borussia Dortmund, and will score them if he goes somewhere else next time. It's not just that finishing ability; it's the calculation of being able to do absolutely everything. The calculation to know that I've got the ball 15 yards out from goal. This is a good position to have a shot, but I know I can make it better for me. It's almost like a mathematical equation was going on in his head at that point. Despite the fact he's got a defender closing him down, he still knows what he can do. And you're right, it is that overall package that makes him so good. And the great thing is that City have found a way to kind of accept. You know, you often get Guardiola tries to change a player. I suppose Grealish is a good recent example that he's kind of changed Grealish's game, and often players will come to see Haaland. But I think there's also maybe that they've just learned to live with him, that he is never going to be this wonderfully technical striker. He's not going to be, you know, someone like a Firmino when he was at his prime in Liverpool. He would have been perfect for Guardiola as well, I think, because he could score goals, but he could drop deep, he could link play. He was a brilliant technician. Haaland isn't that, and instead, City have, like we say, they almost just play with 9 outfield at times and just say, you stay there and do that. Don't worry about getting involved in the build-up. We have got it. And when he's scoring, you know, 91 goals in 100 games, then why not? You can live with it. And it was a good start for him. I mean, he didn't. I think he fell scoring 17 of the last 27 last season, and there was kind of this chatter that a team's working him out, a team's realising how to defend against him. I mean, in those games he did score, and then he got 5 against Luton, he got 4 against Wolves, I think it was. So when he was scoring, he was still scoring hatfuls. But I think there was this perception that maybe, okay, he might, you know, his numbers went down partly through injuries. Maybe they'll go down again. Teams are starting to work him out now. But I think he's a player that is just almost impossible to work out because of how good he is, and scoring and getting a big game for him at the start of the season was big. We know he's you know, he hasn't. I don't think he's scored in the cup final yet for City. Not scored at Wembley. There's these kind of for people looking for a reason to doubt him, they can find ammunition essentially. And when you add in, you know, City 2 wins in 10 against the rest of the top 6 last season, the big 6. You know, when City go and win an away game at Chelsea on the opening day and Haaland scores in it, it's kind of like, okay, you know, you have to find another straw to clutch at, essentially.
Yes. And, you know, should say as well, credit to Mr. Pep Guardiola again, Mr. Tiki Taka, who has won the Champions League and the treble, playing 4 centre-backs and a back 4, and has, you know, for a 3rd season in a row, is playing with a big number 9, you know, the man who came to ruin English football, and, you know, was Sergio Aguero was out the door and Gabriel Jesus was in. He didn't score as many goals, but he could press, and, you know, and now City have sold Julian Alvarez, who in many ways would be seen as a typical Pep Guardiola player, because Alvarez can't get in ahead of this freakishly good tall man up front. Is just another sort of example of Guardiola adapting and keeping himself relevant to the modern game to find a way to win, because that is what it is all about, winning. And I've sort of almost managed to segue that in that sort of City did not manage to win without Rodri very much last season, and Rodri, probably the big miss from the first team squad. He didn't train with them last week. He's had a lot of time off after his very long summer and his very sort of public pleads for more time off. That was going to be the big question, really, wasn't it? Especially against a Chelsea team who could boast the 100 million plus Enzo Fernandez and the 100 million plus Caicedo and Romeo Lavia, of course, as well. All on the pitch at some point. It was a big test for Mateo Kovacic, wasn't it?
It was, yeah, and one he passed. And as Pep said afterwards, credit to his mum and dad. A classic Pep quote, really. And it felt classic Chelsea that for all the money they've spent, the game was over for them when a midfielder they wanted rid of last year skipped away from £100 million Fernandes and scored and didn't celebrate. And Pep was talking afterwards about how much he enjoyed his time at Chelsea, how positively Kovacic talks about Chelsea. And that is a player Chelsea wanted rid of because he wasn't glamorous enough. And he came back and basically made mugs of their £260 million midfield. It sums them up, and it sums City up really in finding a solution. Interesting that Guardiola was talking about Kovacic benefiting from his first season at the club and being better in his second season. And I think that the greatest praise you could pay him was me and Joe were talking about it just before the goal, and he said the best thing you'd say about Kovacic is that you haven't really noticed him. And I think you have games like that with Rodri. I think Rodri's become more noticeable because I think people generally consider him the best player in the world now. So eyes are drawn to him. But until he had that status, when he was still just kind of not a secret at City, but the rest of the world didn't really grasp how good he was when City knew. You wouldn't really notice him at times in games, and then maybe you'd watch it back and you'd be like, God, he was absolutely integral again. And Kovacic was kind of like that. This wasn't the control that City always exert on games, but then Rodri played in this game last year and it finished 4-4. So, it's not an exact science. And Kovacic I thought was really good. Had a bit of support from Bernardo, who was everywhere, but generally was the deepest midfielder and was just very, very calm, very composed. And yeah, it felt big, not just for doing it without Rodri, but it's for the psychology of doing it without Rodri. Because I asked Pep in the press conference after the game about the importance of that and how it had been this issue last season. 4 suspensions before Christmas, 4 defeats, and it's not just can they actually do it without Rodri, but it's almost in the minds of the players. Can we do it without Rodri? And when he's not there, it can be this psychological burden. So to get the monkey off the back, as it were, on the first day of the season in a difficult away game has got to be massive. And you could sense, I mean, Guardiola was in a great mood post-match, but you could sense like how important he felt it was, when he's kind of making digs about, what he said, when someone says City cannot do it without him, we break all the opinions and records, and we broke this one as well. And it's, it's kind of, it's classic Pep in a way that people are saying, like, people said we couldn't do it without him, and we've done it without him. And, he was talking about we want him back as quickly as possible, but survive this period, which maybe suggests he won't be available next weekend either. And then just some really positive stuff on Kovacic and benefiting from the second season. And I mean, I would still think City need to sign another player in Rodri's position, but it is difficult getting the right one. I know Guardiola said about signing players that play 2 positions. And I think me and you have had this conversation on the podcast previously. I was on the same train there and back with Rich Jolly yesterday, and we're talking about it. And I said again, it's almost become like I used before, but it's the Harry Kane problem at Tottenham, isn't it? That Rodri's so good. Who do you get to be his deputy? Because they just aren't going to play. You're looking for the Roberto Soldado of defensive midfielders, really. And it's not, you almost need someone who can play a kind of Declan Rice, but obviously not necessarily as good as that, I guess, but who can play Rodri's role, but can also play somewhere else. And maybe they've got it. Maybe they've got it in Kovacic. Maybe they'll get it in Stones. Maybe they'll get it in Rico Lewis. Maybe someone like that will emerge this year. And I guess Kovacic is the favourite, but it does feel like they could probably still do with someone there. But it's maybe less pressing now you've seen Kovacic do the job in a difficult stadium.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. It's not a solution that will immediately please everyone who feels they're a bit short, just in terms of bodies. But there was a fella yesterday in blue who looked very good at right back and very good charging forward in midfield, and who didn't get the game time that maybe anyone wanted last season. Are we back to Rico Lewis season?
I mean, it's got to be a possibility. I thought he was magnificent yesterday. There was a moment early on where Nkunku just tried to go inside him and use his pace and his body. And Lewis just totally destroyed him, basically. Just didn't let him do it and came away with the ball. The moment at the back post when Neto thought he had that goal was brilliant defending, really alert defending. And, we've seen Lewis play midfield and right back, and there still seems this sort of uncertainty about where's he going to play. And the interesting thing about yesterday was he didn't play right back and go in alongside Kovacic. He played right back and went in alongside De Bruyne. He was in that kind of inside right number 10 channel. He was so high at times in attacks. And you'd kind of see it when the play was building on the other side. And suddenly he would just go. You've been to Stamford Bridge. You know how good that press box can be for kind of seeing things close up. It's very close to the pitch. And when City were attacking first half and Lewis was on our side, you would sometimes just see him go and just sprint and then just stop as soon as he got to that kind of number 10 position and look to overload Chelsea in that area. And yeah, brilliant performance. Real shame his goal was disallowed it because he deserved it. But I thought he was excellent. And it's going to be, when we did the podcast last week, Joe was, we were asking what's kind of who's going to be the surprise at City this year, or what's the thing to look out for? And right back feels like it could qualify for that. When, if we're putting Bob to the sideline at the moment, given his injury, right back feels like it's got the potential this year to be a bit of a turning point, because Kyle Walker now 33.
Yeah,
he's a great, he's clearly loved by Guardiola for his captaincy, but didn't have an amazing season last year, I don't think. And when you see Lewis doing that, it's like, okay, this could get interesting this season at right back, I think.
Yeah, it was. I mean, Walker's got incredible fitness, so sort of he will back himself all day to keep going. I think he did an interview this last week. We said he wants to score more goals this season, which
takes enough shots.
Yeah. But it was. I spoke to him in the week of the FA Cup final, and you never know how open these players are going to be at any one point. But the interview was going well enough where I thought, well, I can ask him about his future and he might give me an answer here. And he sort of said, well, I want to stay at City next season, even if I don't play as much. And it just seemed interesting at that point when I don't know if anyone played more minutes than him last season, but he was certainly up there as one of the most. And you sort of thought, well, why would that be in your head that you might not play as many minutes next season, unless maybe a conversation's been had, or something's happened that's made you think, yeah, I might not play as many minutes this season. But when you see Lewis play like that, and then obviously you do have John Stones and Manu Akanji as well, who can play right back and push forward, which would obviously help the number 6 position. I think it was the treble year when Pep said, no, Kyle can't do that. For their new system, which was pretty brutal, but accurate. And it just quite interesting to see if Lewis A does get more games, but B where he lands up, because he wants to play in midfield. But could he play in midfield, from a starting position of right back? Because he's done it against, you would say, one of the most exciting attackers, excuse me, in the division, in Christopher Nkunku, who scored a hat-trick against City a few years ago. And he's kept him, well, he's done such a good job on him that Nkunku's been taken off before the hour mark. So, Rico Lewis, very, very promising. And also a point to say that we've praised Lewis, we've praised Haaland, we've praised Kovacic. City have had most of their first team away at the Euros this summer. And all you can ask for when you don't have many players is that the ones that do come back early make a difference in the opening weeks of the season and help you through those games. So it seems like, they've all turned up when they've needed to.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that was something that really pleased Guardiola yesterday. I know he said it on telly, and he as well. I mean, he said he was impressed and surprised, and he said it's a privilege and an honour to be a manager of this group of players. And I think he sensed that a lot of those players had really gone to the well to get them through it. He said, I think he said something like 80% of the players weren't there in the summer, 80% of the first team weren't there. And it has been a really disrupted pre-season. There's no doubt about it. A lot of the players, some of the really, I mean, the 3 England internationals were on the bench who would all normally start, you would think. Rodri wasn't there. Some of the players haven't played in pre-season. Some of the players only got a few minutes. So it was a case, like I say, of players really, really stepping up. And, we'll make them on after the break. But I thought the scenes at full time and Pep's celebrations with the players, dragging them all over to the fans, and it really spoke of kind of what he felt about this victory. And it was by no means classic City. You'll see City play an awful lot better in November onwards when they're fully up to speed. But it was a case of coming to a really difficult ground on the opening day of the season when you're really stretched. And like you say, stepping up, players stepped up. Bernardo was absolutely everywhere. But with one of those performances that you sometimes don't really appreciate at the ground, it flashed up on our monitors that he got man of the match. And me and Joe were like, oh, right, that's interesting. We were like Kovacic, Lewis probably, and then Bernardo gets it. And you're like, okay. And it's one of those like, well, actually thinking about it, he has been everywhere and, been that energizer bunny, and, players like that just stepping up. And it does show that, this team just do not stop, do they? All that talk of kind of maybe the hunger's dimmed or whatever, it just doesn't stop. And yeah, I would have given man of the match to Lewis. I thought he was exceptional defensively, made a real difference going forward. And I think it's going to be a fascinating season for him to see, like you say, if he does play more. It's interesting Walker's offering that up to you in the week of the cup final, because at that stage of the season we'd have all said he's going to play 50 games again next season, and he's maybe already seeing that he's not. So yeah, that's interesting. And I mean, Lewis is he's almost been developed in a factory for Guardiola fullback. Only he's come through at a time when he's using a centre half into midfield instead.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting to see how that will pan out, because I don't think he's going to want Stones and Lewis making those runs into midfield if he plays right back. But maybe you have Stones stepping into the number 6 line and Lewis into the number 10 line and just leaving 2 back. I mean, who knows with Guardiola and what tactical developments are ahead of us. You were talking about a classic number 9 before. I mean, he started with a classic number 9 and 2 flying wingers trying to get to the byline at the start of the game. It was classic old school English football in a way, but there is always a tactical development with this team, and I think Lewis is going to be one to watch this season.
Yeah, your answer just a bit too long for me to make it natural to sort of bring up that bit where you talked about how good it was, Kyle Walker opening up to me, bringing out my journalistic skills. But I'm bringing it back anyway to that, because that's all I care about. We will talk celebrations, but we will go to a break first, and then we'll be back to talk more about Sunday's game against Chelsea, and also kind of what it might mean for the window and the rest of the season. Hello and welcome back to the Talking City podcast, where everything is rosy once again in Manchester City's world after that 2-0 win over Chelsea. It was a bit of a difficult week for them leading up to it, with news of Oscar Bobb's broken leg, or not broken leg, but he's broken a bone in his leg. That may not be a broken leg, but is certainly a very serious injury. And that kind of hit harder than anyone could have told you, like even 4 weeks ago. If someone had said at the beginning of the Euros, Oscar Bobb's going to break his leg in the week before the season, it wouldn't have been great news. But Bob had almost become kind of like the talisman, the player to lead City through these opening weeks, because he'd had such a good summer. And then now news that he's out, 3-4 months, having taken on an even more important kind of status, I suppose, once Julian Alvarez had left the building. It really wasn't ideal preparation for Sunday, was it?
No, it wasn't. When I don't think there's any doubt that he would have started that game, to be honest. And as me and Joe had said on Friday, I don't think there's any doubt he'd have started in our fantasy teams either. So a blow on several fronts, not least for City and Bob, I guess. But let's not forget about our own issues here. That was a problem, and it just kind of summed up this disrupted build-up that I think this was always likely to be a quieter summer at City. They had kind of had two bigger windows recently, but I think there was still a view that things needed to be done. They've now lost Alvarez. I guess you could say Savinho is an Alvarez replacement. Bob as well. Bob didn't play that much last season. I guess it's kind of 1.5 players in for Alvarez maybe, but I think there's still a view that maybe they'd need to do something in midfield. But it still didn't really matter. And in a way, I guess now the concern is Savinho's injury. I mean, it was interesting that Pep said afterwards about some disturbance, solve it. And it's kind of like, right, okay, that's interesting when you're talking about a 20-year-old who's got whatever the issue is in the knee. It's obviously not something serious, but when you're talking about he has to solve it and it's an issue in the past, at some point it reaches a point of, right, how do we solve it? And I mean, Pep seemed to think it'd be okay for next week, but it's obviously another issue. But they do have Foden and Grealish out wide as well. But yeah, the loss of Bob did feel pretty seismic. I mean, it shows how quickly things can change in pre-season, but he had been great. And the biggest disappointment in a way, I mean, obviously the biggest disappointment is for him, but I think all of us, and City fans in particular, was looking forward to watching him because he had been so exciting in pre-season. It's not just a player coming through and looking the business. He looked incredibly exciting to watch in a position that is probably the most exciting on the pitch. Wingers are the ones who excite fans, aren't they? The ones who get fans off their seats. And he looked in pre-season like he was going to really turn some heads this season. So yeah, a real shame for him. But City coped without him, and then they coped with losing the guy who'd come in for him after 45 minutes essentially, but he was playing on one leg from about 40. So plenty went against them. The second half was City of last season, no new signings. Chelsea signings coming off the bench for their debuts. I said in my intro to my piece yesterday, there's some things that are commonplace. You just can't go without on the opening day of the season. It's always sunny. Haaland always scores, and there's always someone on the Chelsea team sheet that you're like, oh, they signed him, did they? Or who was that? I mean, Renato Vega, saw him on the team sheet. We were like, who's Renato Vega? Anyone know who he is? It's it's a bizarre club, and I mean, Raheem Sterling, to go back to an old City player, Sterling's statement from Sterling's camp when the team is announced was just the kind of bonkers thing that happens to a mad football club.
Yeah, well, let's get into that now, shall we? Let's sort of dive in ahead of any transfer window stuff, because I mean, watching it as well, I certainly couldn't help but just look at Chelsea's shirts and think, what a mess. Why is a club that has ambitions to be like a top 6 club, Champions League, winning the league, why have they not even got a shirt sponsor started? Like for the beginning of the season, like everything about Chelsea Football Club. They've made a guy who was the middle of a racism storm over the summer. They've made him captain. They've exiled, a senior player who's won so much with City, and not really done bad. He was one of Chelsea's best players when they played City like 2 weeks ago in a friendly. And just a huge mess, and it kind of shows how difficult it is to come in and disrupt English football. And City liked to see themselves as disruptors when they came in, and they still do, and they kind of are, I suppose. But City's success has been very much down to continuity, and you kind of saw the contrast, didn't you, on Sunday between the shambles that Chelsea are, with no one kind of knowing who anyone is, and the the spirit, I suppose, that Guardiola has with his players and the fans.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, essentially, City are a very well-run football club, aren't they? Very professionally run, very carefully run, very patiently run. And Chelsea are the total opposite. I mean, it's just an absolute mess. I mean, you say it shows how hard it is to run a football club, and it obviously is hard, but it's not that hard. Like, it's not as hard as they are making it look. It is just a total shambles. And yeah, I mean, City deserve praise for the way they have run that club. There was patience from when Abu Dhabi started, and that they even now they've signed one player this summer. There's no panic there. There's no we need a body. Let's get a body in. It just doesn't happen. They just get the right players in. They are happy to go with a reduced squad. I mean, Chelsea's squad is absolutely obscene. I was on the train home with we were mentioning Rich Jolly and looking through the squad, and I was like, and we know Rich is essentially a footballing Wikipedia himself. I was looking at players going like, what's happened to that one? And he's like, he wasn't in the 20 today. What's happened to that one? He's on loan. What's happened to that one? They're trying to sell him. They only signed him last year. Yeah, they're trying to sell him. It's like, what is happening here?
Yeah,
and just like there's so many players like that, and even you look at four who weren't in squad yesterday: Chilwell, Gallagher, Lukaku, and Sterling, who they all obviously want rid of. Are four pretty big name players. I mean, one is the type of player that you would think they need to keep in Gallagher. The others are players on big wages. I mean, it's just an absolute mess. And I said to Rich, you know, this is a club addicted to transfers. When you look at their all transfers page on Transfer Market, which is always a journalistic favourite, and they've already got 2 deals in the 2025-2026 season confirmed. In 2 young Brazilians, and you're like, this is just not going to end well. And I mean, Maresca was having a tough time in the press conference. There was a little bit on Sterling, but I think he'd been asked a lot of that on telly. So a lot of it was on Fernandes, and rightly so. I mean, it's a mad decision to make the guy captain, to be honest. And he's talking about, have you not made mistakes in your life? It's like, well, yes, but not on that level.
yeah.
Also, it wasn't really a mistake. Like, he was clearly singing the song because he believes in it or he likes the song. There was no like, I didn't know the words to it. He knew full well what he was singing. And also, it happened about 3 weeks ago. It's not like he made a mistake 5 years ago. It's very, very recent. Just a crazy decision. And there's just, I don't believe there is a chance on this earth that Maresca is still in charge at the end of the season. It's just not going to happen. I don't see any way he survives in that job. And there was a moment in the first half when they'd gone behind, when they were trying to build up from the back, and you could sense Stamford Bridge getting impatient. There was quite a few fans near us getting impatient. And I was watching him, Maresca sort of half turned, and it looked like he half turned to kind of like complain to the fans, and then thought better of it. And it was just like, I don't think this is going to end well for you. I mean, by all accounts, they were terrible in pre-season. And I think it's going to be grim.
Yeah, and Maresca, a guy who was very prickly. You're talking about a guy who was top of the league with Leicester, 10 points ahead, and threatening to quit because the fans didn't appreciate his style of football and things like that. Yeah. And also just a sort of slight contrast as well. You've got like Enzo Fernandez being made captain at Chelsea, while they're not even letting Conor Gallagher train with the first team and things like that. You compare that to, say, João Cancelo is never going to get back in at City. Cancelo's not. He's not going to get back in because of what is past, and that is accepted. But he still wears the number 7 shirt. He's still in first team training. He's not going to be a part of games. But Pep was asked fairly, a few questions about him on Friday, and he didn't say no, he will never play again for us. He is finished. He gave answers that were polite enough in respect of the players. And there's, no one likes it when a player tries to force a move away from a club, but it feels a bit more, I don't want to say sinister, but it's nasty when a club uses its might to force a player out, because it's just not good, is it?
No, and they're doing it with a player who is homegrown, who was captain at times last year,
Yeah,
a
fans were
fan's,
singing for him on Sunday, weren't
fans
they?
was, yeah, he's a fan's favourite in Gallagher, and I think he's a good player. Midfield, but I think he serves a purpose. I think his biggest issue, probably, I mean, that's probably a bit harsh. Probably didn't sound like it's not put that on his CV, is he? But
no, but that line is more than a lot of kind of decision makers at Stamford Bridge, you could say.
Yeah, totally, and he's a better player now than some of the other players they've got there, and just offers something that they badly need. It just seems so strange, and it just kind of, I mean, the Sterling thing I think was just really ill-advised to release that statement. Excuse me. I mean, it becomes such a distraction ahead of the game. For all that he's disappointed, the manager is within his right to leave him out of the 20.
Yeah.
I mean, the biggest issue for them, and the biggest part of that statement, is Raheem has 3 years left on his contract. And it's like, best of luck getting rid of him.
I think that was the first line, wasn't it?
That's very high up. Yeah. No one's. We were talking about it during the game. I don't see a market for him in this country unless you're talking a club like someone like Crystal Palace, maybe. I mean, he's played for half of the big six already, which also makes two of them. Well, it makes Man United a non-starter. A return to Liverpool is a non-starter. Arsenal ain't going to happen. I mean, Tottenham, I don't see it. I don't know where he goes, to be honest, unless he goes abroad. So, they've got so many problems. They look a disastrous club, and I think there's been a lot of speculation that their transfer spending this year is because they fear a transfer ban or expect a transfer ban incoming because of these self-reported issues. But the other problem is they're signing players that no one else wants. They think they're being clever signing these young players. We were talking about the example of David Datro Fofana. They signed him with no competition from any other big club. The same with the striker from Barcelona that came on, the Spanish Mark Gueye yesterday.
Yeah.
Like, they're signing these players with no competition for a reason, because they're not quite of that level. And
but even Cole Palmer, like, they sign him for a big fee on a long contract, and then he plays so well in his first year that he signs a new contract on more money. And it's like, you say, oh, it's amortization and we spread it across, but like, even if you're paying, not the biggest wages, if you've got 50 players on your books, those wages add up. And the players still want better pay when they play better. So it's like, you're not sort of saving anything by having relatively cheaper wages for the first year or whatever.
No, and you've kind of made this problem where they're giving these 8, 9, 10. I mean, Palmer extended his contract till about 2050 or something this summer. They've got these contracts that are so long, and then you offer a homegrown player in Conor Gallagher 2 years.
Yeah,
and, you can't blame him for going, hang on a minute, like, who are these guys on long contracts?
And that
a bit more than 2 years.
It sounds like really parochial, doesn't it? But that is what football players do. They go, hang on, how come he is earning this much more than me? And how come him next to me is earning more than me? Like, I want the same. It's quite a closed shop, and those are the comparison points that clubs have to live by. But as much as Chelsea is a club where people will be saying, do not sign for that club. Like, you look at City, and yes, they're still in the market for cover for Rodri and an attacker. With 2 weeks to go, 10 days, I'm not sure whether they're going to get players in, but they're going to try. But you've got a manager who, with every single one of his matchday squad, is saying, yeah, I trust you absolutely. I know exactly what you're going to do. You go and show your best work, and let's win together at Stamford Bridge, and then let's celebrate in front of the fans after we've done it. It's continuity and stability is doing a lot for City at the minute.
Yeah, it really is. And we've had Guardiola's talked a lot in press conferences when he's been here about that kind of need to refresh and that need to change, and that sometimes you have to change 3 or 4 players in a summer just to keep it fresh. It's one of the great challenges of spending as long at a club as Guardiola has now done at City, that it can get stale, but it hasn't, because a lot of these players have been here for years now. A lot of those players yesterday have been here for a long, long, long time and are still playing at the top level. And when you read a lot of the season previews this year, there seems to be this idea that City only signed one player. They are an aging team. I mean, I think Guardiola inherited an aging team, made them younger, and they're now obviously back at that kind of cycle.
Stayed for 9
been
years.
for so long. Yeah, where a lot of them are a lot closer to the end than the start.
Yeah.
And I think there's a view like them. They're an aging team. They've only signed one player this year. That's that hunger gone. The case for Arsenal, beyond hoping something happens in court, seems to be City are a bit stale. They probably won't be at the level this year. And then they produce a gutsy performance like that. Not a classic City performance at times, but it was gutsy. It was hard fought, and you could just see what it meant to them at the end. The celebrations in front of the away end were massive. They were kind of reminiscent of the ones in the middle of last season when they kept coming from behind. You think of Everton and Luton and Newcastle and Brentford, I think it was in that run, wasn't it? Where they were going behind in away games and getting over the line. I think Everton and Newcastle in particular were two big ones at that time, and you could sense what it meant. And I know it's the opening day, and Pep did say it's 3 points out of 114, but it still felt like a big 3 points. And, I said Guardiola was in a great mood after the game. You could see he was in a great mood on the pitch, and he was pushing all the players there. All the players went to Bernardo at the end. You had Edison pushing Rico Lewis towards the away end. And I looked at that. When I put in my piece, you looked at that and feared for Arsenal, because anyone hoping that there was going to be a change at the top because City had lost a little bit of hunger, forget it. It's just not going to happen. They're as hungry for number 5 as they were for number 1 in terms of successive titles. And I think that just shone through yesterday. And it did. Those celebrations kind of made you realise even more so just what an important win it was for kind of setting the tone and showing everyone else that, we are not going away.
It's a shame there's only 114 points available in a season, isn't there? Really? You'd sort of like to think that there'd be at least one more point on offer to really aim for something to go for.
The charges will be dropped.
Yeah. Too funny that for me, Ty. Yeah, and it felt like a big thing because as much as this season is congested, there are only 2 more weeks until the international break.
Yeah,
dare we say? But we've got Ipswich at home and then West Ham away. Now, City kind of felt like they were going to be undercooked for the whole first part of this season, but with 3 points on the board from Chelsea, Ipswich at home in a week's time and West Ham away in 2 weeks' time looks pretty optimistic that City can start well despite their missing personnel, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. You straight away now you're thinking, okay, 9 from 9 is a real possibility. I mean, Ipswich, even at 70%, surely they will beat Ipswich at home. I mean, Ipswich ran out of steam against Liverpool on Saturday. I said on our preview podcast on Friday, I think Ipswich will stay up, but I don't think they'll stay up by winning at the Etihad. That's got to be a City win. And then you come to West Ham, and it's kind of like, pretty much all the players will be up to speed then, or at least up to kind of 90% levels, I guess.
Yeah.
Those England players will be back in the team. Maybe Rodri will be back. It does suddenly. I mean, the banana skin was this, wasn't it? This was a horrible first day fixture after a tournament after a summer when so many players have been at a major tournament and so many players have gone the distance. It was a really horrible first day fixture, and they just dealt with it like City do, just professionally. Even if they can blitz you through their brilliance, but even when they're not at it, even when they've got problems in terms of player availability and things like that, they just find a way to get it done so often that winning mentality is just totally ingrained in them, isn't it? And it clearly hasn't gone anywhere. And it suddenly opens up, and Pep was saying afterwards, another week now for Ipswich, another week for West Ham, will be getting better. Then we'll have the squad for the season. It's clearly opening up the possibility to more changes there in terms of what does happen on the window. But I think he kind of mentioned for the confidence, but you can also imagine that the mood at the CFA this week is going to be very high, because I think they all realised that was a horrible first day fixture in the circumstances. To come out of it with a good win is is massive. So yeah, I think that's going to give him a hell of a lot of confidence and belief and a good mood going into that Ipswich game.
Yes, seems like business as usual as the season
Absolutely
starts, and yeah, we'll see how long City can keep that up. And obviously, we'll have more reaction to Chelsea on the website, but also, you know, we'll be keeping you up to date with any transfer ins and outs as they happen, because City's still expected to see a few players go and could yet bring in 2 more players to the squad to help push them through this season. And yeah, and then Ipswich away on Ipswich at home, sorry, on Saturday. So yeah, it feels, let's keep this feeling of excitement before it does go away again in the international break in a fortnight. But yes, a good opening weekend for City, and I'd like to think a good podcast for us. So if you did like it, please give it a good review, and we'll be back soon to cover all the latest around Ipswich and anything else that has been going on. Thanks very much.